David Mour, ladies and gentlemen, 502 live streamers on board, Maxwell Mitchell, Summer Dickerson, Riot Hart, and myself, along with live streamer Sherry Wright. And David, you have some information to give us about the Hurstbourne Lane gunman incident. Please take it away.
I do. And this is a little bit of a detailed story, and I like to talk, but I'll go as fast as I can. But this really, this whole incident just is a classic illustration of what's gone on in Louisville, Kentucky in the last year now, and how protesters are treated versus other folks in the community. Last September 18th, there was a protest. Actually, it was a rally at the East End office of our Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, which is on Whittington Parkway. It's sort of it runs between Hurstbourne Lane and Shelbyville Road. That'd be the southwestern corner of the intersection of those major arteries. There was probably, I was there was probably 200 people involved in the protest, in the rally. There was a rally in front of the building that houses the Attorney General's Louisville office. After the rally concluded, after there were some speakers, the marchers moved out on, I don't know if it's Whittington Parkway, but whatever street it is that runs out to Shelbyville Road and intersects with Shelbyville Road. The marchers turned right or east on Shelbyville Road at that point. At the corner of intersection with Hurstbourne Lane, which is about maybe a block up, LMPD formed a line. The SRT was there. They formed a line and forced everyone to turn south on Hurstbourne Lane or to the right, which the marchers did. The marchers were in the right lane of traffic, the southbound lanes, the correct lane of traffic. And I would say there was a good several hundred people. There was a pretty good amount of traffic on Hurstbourne Lane. At some point, a vehicle that was heading northbound on Hurstbourne Lane sort of interposed himself. It was a male driver named James Geisler. He interposed himself into the lane of traffic, brandishing a handgun at protesters. He actually had pulled the handgun out before he even pulled up into the line of traffic and pointed it at a lady named Heather Lundberg Green, who was on a motorcycle, and he said to her, according to her, "I've been looking for you," pointing a gun at her. He then pulled up and inserted himself into the line of traffic. A lady named Robin Ash, because this really isn't the point of the story, but Robin Ash I think Robin's a homeless advocate, and has protested and stood up for those that need standing up for. Robin brandished her weapon to repel the threat from James Geisler. Geisler actually at one point got out of his vehicle and was pointing his weapon one direction while looking the other direction, which violates every tenet of weapon safety, firearm safety that is known to man. He clearly endangered the lives of many. Robin exercised her rights under the Kentucky statutes to defend herself and defend protesters. And this guy not only endangered protesters, but he endangered police officers that were there and bystanders that were there, other motorists and people that were along the edge of the roadway watching. As a matter of fact, a couple of days, when it came out in the news that I was representing her after she was charged with wanton endangerment, a lawyer that I know in Louisville, I don't know him well because he does real estate law, which is kind of boring, but he's a good lawyer and he knows me, and he saw in the news that I was representing her. He sent me an email and said, "David, my son and I were in a vehicle behind the caravan in the protest. We were right behind Jim Geisler. He was clearly the aggressor. He threatened those people. He was out of control. And if you need me to testify, I'll be happy to," which was great. So the case, Robin was arrested on the scene by an officer named Jimmy Johnson and charged with felony wanton endangerment. 2 weeks later, we had a preliminary hearing, which is a determination of whether there was probable cause, on which I think the judge erred, but basically the county attorney put Jimmy Johnson on the stand. He read the narrative of what had happened that day. And I asked him, this narrative of what you're claiming happened, and you've come into court to try to indict and get my client indicted and convict her of a felony, and you're making all these statements in here. This information, I assume, came from Jim Geisler. And he said yes, and it was Robin did this, Robin did that. It was, facts A through Z or whatever. And there was excellent video taken by Sherry Wright. I know there was other video, but Sherry's was taken by a guy named Dan Delaney, a local videographer, and Dan made a video of Sherry's on the ground video with the LMPD helicopter was there that day. So he interposed footage, I don't know if that's what you call it, but side-by-side footage of the helicopter and Sherry's footage. That footage clearly showed that Jim Geisler was the absolute aggressor. In my opinion, he committed hundreds of counts of wanton endangerment because he was waving his weapon around and pointing his weapon at protesters, most of whom were unarmed. Robin happened not to be, and as I said, she exercised her right under Kentucky law to defend herself and others, and she drew her weapon and pointed it at Geisler, which backed down the threat, and fortunately Robin used her head. Under Kentucky law, I think she would have been justified in shooting that guy to repel the threat, because if someone pulls a weapon on you, you don't have to wait for them to fire. You can pull your weapon and fire in defense of yourself. That's my opinion of the essence of the law. But she didn't. She drew her weapon, backed him down. The group kind of broke up, and Robin was immediately arrested by LMPD in charge of wanton endangerment. So at the preliminary hearing, the county attorney puts their case on and says, well, here's what happened. And Jimmy Johnson says, yeah, that's what happened. That's what Jim Geisler told me. So on cross-examination, I asked Johnson, I said, well, I'm going to have the county attorney replay the video. And whenever you see fact A, that there were hundreds of people surrounding his car and beating on it, that Robin did this or Robin did that, all of these things that you say make up the offense of wanton endangerment, when you see that, I want you to ask the county attorney to stop the video. He never asked her to stop the video. And at the end of it, I said, so basically everything that Jim Geisler told you that day that's in the narrative report that you say came from Jim Geisler is not true, is it? And he said, no, it's not. And I said, and in fact, Jim Geisler was clearly the aggressor here, and
I believe I was live streaming that.
I think you were.
I
think you were. Yeah. And I have a copy of the video of what happened that day, because I turned the video, the judge, and she's a good judge, but I think she's wrong that day, because she made a finding of probable cause. And I said, you cannot make a finding of probable cause based on what we now know to be fraud. And she said, but when the officer had this information, and I said, yeah, on the street on September 18th, when the officer had the information, what the alleged victim tells him, yeah, that's probable cause to believe that an offense was committed sufficient for an arrest. But 2 weeks later, when the officer should have had time to review everything and determine, hey, is this information true? Because it was all over the media, because LMPD, as they usually do, reported a lie to the media. LMPD went to, I think it was WDRB, which doesn't surprise me, but there was a story on one of the local affiliates, and I think it was DRB, and they said, oh, protester arrested for threatening motorist in caravan. And within 24 hours, it's kind of like the Bearcat situation. Within 24 hours, people come forward with video and information that that's not what happened. LMPD had to walk back the story. It was all over the media. I asked Jimmy Johnson, the sergeant who arrested Robin, in the preliminary hearing, I said, have you done anything to review any of this information to determine if this was true before you came in here today? And he said no. So I said to the judge, well, 2 weeks ago when he arrested her, yeah, it appears as though Robin Ash did something based on what the victim says. We now know today, and we knew that day actually because there was video all over the place, we know that Robin did not commit a crime, and we know that, in my opinion, Jim Geisler did, because he clearly was the aggressor. But the judge sent it to the grand jury anyway. I contacted the Commonwealth attorney and sent all the information, the live stream videos, what you were talking about, Riot Heart, the video from the hearing, and I sent it to the Commonwealth attorney. And to their credit, this time, the assistant Commonwealth attorney, whose last name is Olberding, Ryan took it to the grand jury, presented the case, and asked the grand jurors, my understanding is he asked the grand jurors not to indict Robin Ash because Robin Ash did not commit a crime. The grand jury did not indict Robin Ash, and subsequent to that, that case against Robin Ash has been dismissed. And I have now sued Jim Geisler and Jimmy Johnson for malicious prosecution. About maybe a month, or well, it wasn't even a month, a week or two down the road from those events, I went with 3 people who were endangered by Geisler's conduct. Sherry Wright, a live streamer, Tara Bassett, a live streamer, and a young lady named Heather Lundberg Green, who was at the protest that day. And that's the lady, I'll get to that, yeah. Riot Heart was there for the purpose of live streaming, and we did. So I was told by the county attorney's office and by, I think, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office and by LMPD that in order to have action taken against Geisler, we had to file a report. So Riot Heart, I believe the date was October 8th. I could be wrong on the date, but it was right around that time. As I said, Sherry Wright, Tara Bassett, and Heather Green, myself, and Riot Heart appeared at the 8th Division. As instructed, we knocked on the door. An officer who I remember him pretty well, he was an African-American guy, young guy, maybe 35-ish, that's young to me, came out. We live streamed our conversations with him. I actually think I was wearing a tie that day because I'd been in court. I was. And we recorded it, filed reports. He took all the information. I think he did it in one of those steno books. He actually gave us a card, that's typically what the police do. Like on an accident, you get a card that has what the report number will be, et cetera, et cetera. We were told that it would be assigned to a detective and that someone would get back to us. Sherry would periodically call me and say, have you heard anything? I said no. Finally, in January of 2021, now this is October, November, December, January. This is 3 months down the road from when we reported the incident. Sherry contacts me and says, I did contact the 8th Division. I was advised that it had been assigned to a detective, Jeff Hodge, and that he would be in contact with us. As of mid-May, we'd heard absolutely nothing. I was in contact with the chief's, I guess he goes by the title of her adjutant. He's a lieutenant. I was in contact with him in mid-May and over several things, but one was, why haven't we heard anything from your detective on this particular issue, which I think is of utmost importance because it would show the people in the movement, in the civil rights movement, that the police are concerned about their safety. I contacted this lieutenant. We had a discussion about it, and on, May 27th, we were on the phone, and he said, it would be helpful if I had, the report number. So I think Sherry sent it to Tara Bassett, who sent it to me, a copy of the card. I sent it to him. It shows Officer Paget. 8136 is his code. The reference number was 802-006-0046. I sent it to Healy Lieutenant Healy, that's his name, on May 27th. And I said in the text, Officer Paget, this came from one of the complainants, Sherry Wright. She called the 8th Division in January and was told to have been assigned to a Detective Hodges, Jeff Hodges, or Hodge. She left her number, but has never received a call back. He said, okay, I will look into that. Sunday, June 6th at 11:14, I'd heard nothing. I texted the lieutenant and said, any news on James Geisler / Officer Paget / Detective Hodge? By Tuesday, I'd had no response. Tuesday, June 8th, 5:49 a.m., I texted him the same text. Any news on James Geisler, Officer Paget, Detective Hodge? Tuesday, June 8th, about 9 o'clock that morning. Still working on it. I haven't forgot about it. I said, I understand, but it's going on 8 months. If this were a protester, ... unprinted question mark. And then he says to me, or if I had a report number, iLeads isn't the most search-friendly platform, I will find you an answer. I was a little shocked by that because this conversation is June 8th, May 27th, which what's that, 12 days. 12 days earlier, I'd sent him a copy of the card. And I called him and I said, I sent you that 2 weeks ago. And we hung up and I resent it. And I said, there she blows, Officer Paget, 8th Division. His response, that helps a ton. That was, as I said, June 8th. By last Thursday, hadn't heard anything. I said, and that was the day that Officer Corey Evans was indicted by the U.S. DOJ. And I said, and the day before, or maybe the day after, an officer had been charged in a domestic battery situation. And by the way, there's a great story. Ryan Van Velzer did a great story on public radio yesterday, I believe, about that officer who has a pretty long history, according to Ryan's story, of domestic battery. And now he's on suspension because he is the officer who shot the individual who Travis Najdy was going to check on down at, was it 22nd and Gilligan back on November 22nd, 23rd that led to Travis's death. This officer is the officer that shot the guy that Travis was going to check on, and he's already been relieved. He's on, I guess, what do they call it, reassigned or suspended or whatever they call it. Pending that, of course, he would have been suspended again. But I said to Healy, I said, not been a good week for LMPD. Let's see if it can do something right and charge Mr. Geisler. Thursday at 8:18, I did see where the report was taken and assigned to Detective Hodge. It looks like a letter was sent out. I would have your client reach out to the 8th Division and speak to the detective or a supervisor on the status of the case. And I said, what does the letter say? Because that comment's a little remarkable to me, because it wasn't just a client. There were 3, Tara Bassett, Sherry Wright, and Heather Green. And if there was a letter that went out about the status of the case, should it not have gone out to the 3 of them? Should it not have gone out to me? Because I distinctly remember leaving my card with Officer Padgett at the 8th Division that day. He said, his response to what does the letter say, I don't know. It just says a letter was sent to the address that the victim provided on the report. It could have been that the phone number on the report wasn't a good number, or that they couldn't reach the victim. They would have to contact the division to find out what's going on with it. The assigned detective was Hodge, and I believe the sergeant over the detectives in the 8th is Sergeant Hagedorn. Okay? So Saturday afternoon, Tara and I had our little coffee clutch together, and we were discussing this. We got in touch with Sherry and discussed it with her, and I texted the lieutenant and said, not real great customer service there, Lieutenant. When a police officer had an opportunity to arrest a protester and charge her with wanton endangerment, Robin Ash, it happened immediately. It is quite clear Mr. Geisler committed that offense as to hundreds of protesters, police officers, and bystanders. Yet the victims are supposed to chase the police down in order to get them to take any action, and frankly, I'm not optimistic LMPD will do the right thing about this. That probably explains why the DOJ is on to LMPD, and I suspect Officer Evans won't be the last to be convicted of criminal civil rights violations. We will follow up Monday, and I will be requesting a copy of the letter you referenced. Now, that was Saturday at 12:26 p.m. On Monday morning, Sherry, you called the 8th Division and asked for that sergeant and left a message. Tuesday, I called that division and asked for the sergeant. And yesterday, which was Tuesday, 5:14 p.m., I texted the lieutenant and said, so I've called the sergeant and left a message, and Sherry Wright has called the sergeant and left a message. No call back for either of us. This morning, I got a call from the division, the 8th Division, and it was the lady that I spoke to when I called on Tuesday and said Hagedorn didn't come in yesterday or something to that effect, and she would make sure that he got the message and return my call upon his return. So today, I get a call from, not from the supervisor, but from the detective, Detective Hodges. And we spoke for quite a while, and I wanted to put on the record what was said to me because I just found it absolutely remarkable. Basically, he doesn't understand, or expressed to me that he doesn't understand what he's being asked to do. And I said, well, what I as the attorney for the victims and the victims of this want you to do is your job. We want you to investigate this and charge this individual. And he goes, well, if Robin Ash got off, and Robin Ash didn't get off, by the way, Detective. Robin Ash did not commit a crime, and Robin Ash was exonerated by the fact that the grand jury, the Commonwealth attorney, not the defense attorney, but the Commonwealth attorney itself, its office, said to the grand jurors, we don't believe this, well, they didn't say we don't believe this woman didn't commit a crime, but my understanding from my communications with the assistant Commonwealth attorney is they asked them not to indict her, and they did not, and subsequently the district court dismissed the case. And I told him, I said, we want you to do your job. We've reported, aside from the fact that I believe Geisler needs to be charged, what kind of town do we live in where a crime victim reports a crime in October of 2020 and has heard nothing from the police after being promised that we would hear from the police as of June, the following year? And I said to him, I can promise you, if this were a protester who were the perpetrator, it wouldn't have taken 8 months. That protester would have been arrested on the spot. He goes, well, I don't believe that. I'll disagree with you. I said, you can disagree with me all you want. The proof is in the pudding that when it comes to protesters, people in the civil rights movement, people of color, their allies, LMPD doesn't do squat. When protesters are endangered by either police officers or protesters are endangered by citizens out there, LMPD doesn't do a damn thing. And this is yet another example. He goes, well, I don't know of any other examples. I said, where have you been the last year? I said, I can give you plenty of examples. And I can give you examples of the dishonesty on the part of LMPD. Now, I'm not accusing any particular person of lying in this situation, but somebody's lying, and I'll tell you why. Because Detective Hodge told me today there's no addresses on the report. Well, remember what the lieutenant texted me? A letter went out. How can a letter go out if there's no addresses on the report? I never got a letter. Sherry Wright never got a letter. I asked Tara Bassett if she got a letter. Her answer to that is no. I have not talked to Heather Lundberg Green, but I'm quite confident Heather didn't get a letter either. And if a letter went out to a victim, of which there's 3 that reported this, shouldn't there be 3 letters? And shouldn't their counsel, who they knew about, shouldn't I have gotten notification or a letter? Sure, I should have. I don't believe a letter went out, which means somebody in LMPD, shocker of all shockers today, folks, somebody in LMPD is not being truthful. So I would really like to see that record, and I'm going to follow this up, that letter. I'm going to follow this up with an open records request for that letter. And I'm sure they'll object and say it's an ongoing investigation, which is almost laughable because up until today there was no investigation. So Detective Hodge is just at a loss as to what he's supposed to do. And he actually said to me, well, Robin Ash got off. Why wouldn't Jim Geisler get off? Didn't she endanger people? And that case has already been decided. I said, no case has been decided. Robin Ash was not charged by the grand jury, was not indicted with a felony, which is what LMPD wanted. Jim Geisler has never been charged. And there is a multitude of evidence out there. Look at Dan Delaney's video. Look at Sherry Wright's video, Tara Bassett's video. There's tons of video out there from that day that clearly indicates that Jim Geisler endangered not only Bassett, Wright, and Green, but hundreds of other people that were out there, including innocent motorists, people standing on the side of the road, and police officers. The SRT was out there. And this guy's pointing his gun this way and looking this way. And that's what we want. We want you to do their job. And then he wanted to get into a debate about the disagreement over whether LMPD is there to protect protesters. And I said, brother, I'll give you 3 examples of where protesters were not protected. The snipers on the roof last summer. I said, are you aware of that? He goes, well, not really. And I told him the story about the snipers on the roof. 2 snipers, white militia, one's 17, one's 21, who, and LMPD lied to me about how they saw them, because in a meeting with the acting chief Schroeder, Jesse Halliday, Major Paul Humphreys, and a bunch of others, there were some live streamers there and some civil rights group leaders. I asked them, how'd you find out about the snipers that were on the roof of the Commonwealth parking garage, which is the Hyatt Hotel parking garage, the Sunday night after Tyler Girth was murdered? And they said, oh, the helicopter saw them. And I said, can you give us any more information about this? They said, make an open records request. I did. I had to sue them to get the open records. When I got the open records request, the statement they made that the helicopter saw the snipers and that's how it came to their attention is a lie. A motorist, a citizen, reported it on a 911 call. And that's the only reason LMPD, in my opinion, did anything about it, because they knew if they didn't react after someone called 911 and there was a recording, that if somebody got shot, it would come out that that happened and they'd really be in trouble. So they grabbed these snipers off the roof. And did they arrest them and charge them? I can guarantee you, if those have been black people on the roof of that garage with guns, with rifles, scopes, and bipods, which is what snipers use to steady their weapon, they for sure would have been arrested. But I don't think they'd have had to arrest them, because I think the cops would have killed them.
Yep.
Yeah. But it's 2 white dudes that identify themselves as white militia. They were restrained and detained. And at the end of the day, as one of my favorite live streamers always says, they let them go. Not only did they let them go, they drove them to meet their militia buddies at Broadway and Preston, about 1.5 miles away. Unbelievable. That's example number 1 where LMPD sure as hell is not protecting protesters. Example number 2 is Robin Ash, where there's an incident on the street, and who do they arrest? They don't arrest the guy that pulls up waving a gun, pointing guns at people. They arrest a protester who exercises her right to protect herself, risked her own life to protect others. Example number 3, May 1, Derby Day. There's a protest march on Bardstown Road in the evening at a restaurant called, I think it's called Lachey. It's in the 13 to 1500 block of Bardstown Road. One of their customers, unprovoked for no reason, of numerous protesters. Oh, sure. One incident with the human that pointed a gun at Jason Downey's chest. And I was there that night. I reported that entire incident to LMPD on the scene. They did absolutely nothing. They've done no follow-up. They wanted Jason Downey to go down there and swear out a criminal complaint, but what's the point? Because here's what happens when a protester swears out a criminal complaint. Nada, zip, zilch, nothing. And that's been repeated over and over and over. And I told this detective, I said, it's not only that, but it's the dishonesty of LMPD. He says, well, I don't agree with that either. I said, well, I know you don't, but there are many, many, many instances where LMPD has lied over and over and over again over the last year, particularly what's occurred in the civil rights movement. I said, I'll give you another example, the Bearcat. We were talking about the Bearcat a few minutes ago, Tara. The Bearcat back in, I think that was in August maybe, when LMPD put a story out to the media, lied to the public, lied to the media, the mainstream media, and said, oh, a protester vehicle rammed their Bearcat. I call it the tank, the Bearcat, which is an armored vehicle. And it went out on the news on Monday, and within hours, people were sending videos and information to the news station, which finally had to walk it back and say, this is not what happened. LMPD lied about this, and LMPD had to come out and walk back the story. And so then he suggested to me that, well, Robin Ash got out of it because she had a good attorney. And I said, I'm not going to argue with you about that, but Robin Ash got out of it, didn't get out of anything. Robin Ash didn't commit a crime, and a conscientious prosecutor who understands the role of a prosecutor is not just someone to get a conviction, but a minister of justice. This minister of justice courageously decided correctly that Robin committed zero crime and went to the grand jury accordingly, and justice was done. And I said to him, he said, well, it looks to me like this is retaliation, that you all want retaliation. I said, no, we want justice. The move, as far as making things right, full disclosure, yes, I've sued Officer Johnson, Sergeant Johnson, and I've sued Jim Geisler for malicious prosecution for attempting to convict Robin Ash of a crime she didn't commit. But no, we do not want retribution. We do not want revenge.